My life was ordinary, a typical teenage world of school and dreams, until one morning, everything shattered. I woke to the hum of machines and a hushed conversation about a solar eclipse, moments before every alarm in the ICU blared in terrifying unison. Then, a silent tunnel opened, pulling me away from everything I knew. What happens when your existence becomes a whisper between worlds, and death isn't the end, but a doorway? I was at peace with the inevitability of what was coming, an acceptance that most people couldn't comprehend. Death, for me, held no terror. In fact, there was a quiet welcome in its approaching shadow. Before February 26, 1979, my life was, in many ways, unremarkable from the outside, but intensely internal. I was a 16-year-old girl living in a quiet suburban town, navigating the typical landscape of high school, friendships, and future aspirations. My days revolved around classes, homework, and the simple pleasures of being a teenager, losing myself in books, long walks in the woods near my house, and the occasional awkward school dance. I wasn't outwardly gregarious, more of an observer than a participant in the loud drama of adolescence. My inner world was rich, filled with thoughts and feelings I rarely articulated. I'd always been a solitary soul, even as a child. I remember spending hours in my own company, drawing intricate patterns in the dirt, or simply lying in the grass, watching clouds drift by, lost in contemplation. There was a particular tree in our backyard, an old oak with sprawling branches, where I spent countless afternoons. It felt like a portal, a quiet sanctuary where my thoughts could roam freely. One vivid memory from my childhood is of a severe thunderstorm, the kind that rattles the windows and makes the house feel small. While my younger siblings huddled with our parents, I found myself drawn to the window, utterly mesmerized by the raw power of nature. There was no fear, only a profound sense of awe and a strange, almost spiritual connection to the untamed energy outside. It wasn't a traumatic moment, but a defining one, cementing an innate calm within me, a quiet acceptance of forces larger than myself. Emotionally, I was often in a state of tranquil equilibrium. I wasn't prone to dramatic highs or lows. There was a subtle current of something deeper, a quiet understanding that life was a temporary arrangement, a journey with a clear, albeit distant, destination. I wasn't overtly seeking something, but I felt a latent awareness, a knowing that something profound lay beyond the everyday. This wasn't a religious conviction in the conventional sense. Our family was Christian, but my faith was more an intuitive sense of a benevolent guiding presence rather than strict adherence to dogma. As for death, it held no fear for me, not in the way it seemed to paralyze others. I viewed it as a natural progression, an inevitable transition. There was no morbid fascination, just a serene acceptance, almost a gentle curiosity about what lay on the other side. This perspective wasn't born out of cynicism or despair, but rather a deep, ingrained peace. I understood even then that my soul was eternal, and that my time on earth was merely a temporary assignment. I carried this quiet understanding with me, an almost unconscious preparation for a journey I knew, instinctively, would come sooner than most. It was this quiet readiness, this fundamental lack of fear, that would define my passage into the unknown. The alarms became a discordant symphony, each with its own unique wail, marking the rhythm of my fading life. As I listened, a strange lightness enveloped me, and I felt myself begin to float, seeing a tunnel unfurl, beckoning me away from the chaos. The morning of February 26, 1979, dawned like any other, or so it seemed on the surface. But for me, the previous days had been a slow, quiet descent into the inevitable. I was no longer at home, but in the sterile, humming environment of a hospital. specifically the life support unit. I'd been moved there after a brief stint in intensive care, my body steadily succumbing to a severe medical crisis. The exact nature of my illness isn't as important as its relentless progression. My veins, fragile and inflamed from constant IV fluids meant to sustain me, were giving out. Phlebitis, they called it. Every intravenous line inserted would soon rupture the vein, leaving behind a trail of pain and a chilling reminder of my body's losing battle. I remember the distinct sounds of the unit, the hushed footsteps of nurses, the distant clatter of meal trays, and most prominently, the persistent, almost melodic beeping of machines. These weren't just background noises, they were the constant companions of my final days, each beep a monitor of a failing system. I was weak, drifting in and out of consciousness, heavily sedated with morphine, which ironically amplified the sense of calm I already carried. My friends and family, their faces etched with worry, tried to hide their distress, but I could feel their fear, a stark contrast to my own serene acceptance. I was at peace, ready to go. I truly believed my time was up, and there was a strange, quiet joy in that certainty. On this particular morning, a new kind of quiet descended. I was in the glass room, a space reserved for the most critical patients, right next to the nurse's station. I woke to snippets of conversation, hushed but excited. "Solar eclipse," I heard someone whisper. "Just a few minutes to get upstairs and out the door." The unit, usually a hive of activity, began to empty. Staff, captivated by the rare celestial event, momentarily abandoned their posts. A strange stillness settled, almost palpable, like the world holding its breath. Then it happened. A sudden, jarring symphony of sound. Not one alarm, but all of them. Each machine, sensing the imminent collapse of my vital functions, shrieked its unique, piercing cry. The heart monitor, the IV pump, the ventilator, a chaotic chorus of impending doom. It was fascinating, in a detached way, how each alarm had its own distinct pitch and rhythm, creating a macabre overture to what was coming. Despite the blaring cacophony, a profound sense of calm washed over me. There was no panic, no struggle, just a quiet understanding that this was it. The world around me, with its frantic alarms and fading echoes of human activity, began to recede. The tension wasn't in my body, but in the air, a silent prelude to the extraordinary journey I was about to embark on. The cacophony of alarms faded into a distant hum as I felt myself ascend, drawn toward a peculiar horizontal tunnel. Feet first, I drifted effortlessly into its silent embrace, knowing only that I was moving beyond the confines of my earthly form. The moment itself wasn't a sudden, violent wrenching away, but a gentle, almost imperceptible slipping. The blaring alarms, which had moments before been a chaotic symphony of my body's demise, began to recede, their sharp edges softening into a dull, distant thrum. The pain, which had been a constant, nagging companion for days, simply evaporated. It wasn't a sudden cessation, but a slow, graceful release, like a tightly wound spring finally unwinding. A profound lightness replaced the crushing weight of my failing body. I felt an incredible sense of relief, a liberation from the physical constraints that had held me captive. It was as if a heavy cloak had been shed, revealing an ethereal, weightless form beneath. Then I was above. Looking down, I sought it. My own body, lying still on the hospital bed, surrounded by the now silent machines. It was a strange, detached observation, devoid of emotion or fear. The room, the sterile equipment, the empty space where the nurses had been, it was all there, but it felt like a scene from a movie, something I was merely witnessing. not participating in. This wasn't a dream. The clarity was absolute, sharper than any waking moment. I was undeniably me, yet not in that body. The sensation was of pure consciousness, unbound and infinitely free. As I observed, a new phenomenon began to assert itself. It wasn't a blinding flash of light, nor a tunnel of swirling colors. Instead, a distinct gray tunnel materialized, seemingly parallel to the floor, about 20 feet away. It wasn't illuminated from within, rather it was a void, a pathway defined by the absence of light, yet it beckoned with an undeniable pull. There was no fear, only a sense of profound marvel. I felt myself drawn towards it, feet first, an effortless, silent drift. It was a journey without friction, without effort, a pure, unhindered movement through a space that felt both familiar and utterly alien. Within this silent gray passage, a deeper awareness began to unfold. There was no audible voice, no spoken words, but a profound telepathic understanding, a direct infusion of knowledge that bypassed the need for language. It wasn't a presence I could see or touch, but an all-encompassing knowing, a pervasive sense of divine love and infinite wisdom. This wasn't a separate entity, it was the very fabric of existence, the essence of God woven into every fiber of my being. I was aware of God, not as an external deity, but as an ever-present internal truth, a fundamental part of my consciousness. This awareness wasn't new, but it deepened, expanded, becoming an undeniable, visceral reality. The feeling of unity with everything was overwhelming. It wasn't just a concept, it was a lived experience. I felt connected to the very essence of the universe, a part of a grand, harmonious design. The boundaries of my individual self dissolved, merging with an infinite ocean of consciousness. There was no other, there was only one. This profound oneness was imbued with an unconditional love, a love so vast and pure that it transcended all earthly understanding. It was the fundamental truth, the underlying principle of all creation, and I was immersed in it, bathed in its warmth and acceptance. In this state, fear was an impossibility, replaced by an ecstatic tranquility. Though there was no panoramic life review, I gained a profound understanding of my life's trajectory, not as a visual playback, but as an intrinsic knowledge. I understood the circumstances that had led to my impending death, and strangely felt a surge of joyful anticipation. It wasn't about regret for a life cut short, but an exhilarating sense of impending freedom, a readiness to go home. This home wasn't a physical place, but a state of being, a return to the source of this boundless love and knowledge. And the knowledge flowed, not in discrete facts, but as a holistic understanding. I grasped the profound truth that everything matters. Every single moment, every decision, every interaction, no matter how seemingly insignificant, held immense importance. Life was not a random series of events, but a sacred journey, each choice a brushstroke on the canvas of the eternal soul. It became clear that the highest path was to live love, to embody compassion and integrity in every action. The tragedy, I understood, was for souls to dull their senses, to succumb to ignorance, to choose paths that lead to harm. To inflict pain, I knew with absolute certainty, was to harm oneself, to dim the inherent light of the soul. I also gained profound insights into the nature of reality itself. My soul, I understood, preceded my human incarnation. It was an eternal spark, destined to return to its true home, to beings of love, light, and goodness. I would be welcomed home with open arms, with boundless love. This wasn't a belief. It was a deep, undeniable knowing etched into the very core of my being. I understood that there was love on the other side of death for those who suffer as humans, a comforting balm for earthly pain. The knowledge of God, the understanding that God is love, was not a theological concept, but a living, breathing reality that permeated every fiber of this transcendent experience. It was a state of grace, a unique capacity of my soul to comprehend these truths when unburdened by the physical form. This was the culmination of my journey through the gates of the unknown, a profound immersion in unity, love, and absolute truth, a state of consciousness far beyond anything I had ever experienced on earth. My mind expanded, my spirit soared, and I was filled with an unshakable certainty about the eternal nature of the soul and the divine purpose woven into the fabric of existence. Suddenly, I was back, thrust into the jarring reality of my physical form, surrounded by a flurry of urgent faces. Yet within me, a clear, undeniable knowledge pulsed, a solution to the crisis that had just claimed me. The return was not a gentle re-entry, but a jarring, almost violent snap back into a reality I had just transcended. One moment, I was floating in that profound, unified consciousness, bathed in unconditional love and absolute knowing. The next, a crushing weight descended upon me, a suffocating density that was my own body. The lightness, the freedom, the boundless peace all vanished, replaced with a wave of physical agony and a profound sense of shock. It was like being violently yanked from a dream of infinite beauty and plunged into a cold, dark ocean. The first sensation was pain, sharp and insistent, a stark contrast to the blissful absence of it just moments before. My veins screamed with phlebitis, my limbs felt heavy, unresponsive, and a deep, pervasive weakness permeated every cell. There was a distinct feeling of nausea, a visceral rejection of this crude physical form after the ethereal purity of the other side. My lungs burned, struggling to draw breath, and my heart hammered with a frantic, irregular rhythm. The shock wasn't just physical, it was existential. I was alive again, but the joy of that realization was overshadowed by a profound disappointment, almost a grief, for the loss of the transcendent experience. My first thought was a bewildered, "No, not yet. I wasn't finished." There was a deep-seated reluctance to be back, a yearning for the home I had just glimpsed. My eyes fluttered open and the world rushed in, a blur of bright lights, the sterile white of the hospital room, and most strikingly, a cluster of anxious faces, hovering above me. Doctors, nurses, their expressions a mixture of relief and frantic urgency. They were talking about me, about my vitals, about what had just happened. But I already knew. I knew exactly what had happened, and more importantly, I knew what they needed to do. Despite the overwhelming physical discomfort and the disorienting shift in consciousness, a startling clarity emerged. The knowledge I had absorbed on the other side, particularly the practical application of it, was still vividly present. I found my voice, weak and raspy, and began to speak, articulating a precise medical solution. "There's a medication," I whispered, or perhaps thought, with such conviction that it felt like a command. "It's in the hospital pharmacy. It will stop this." I described it, its purpose, its effect. Their faces, initially confused, quickly shifted to skepticism, then a flicker of surprise. This was a drug they were apparently unaware of, or at least one not commonly used for my specific crisis. Their reaction was a mixture of professional skepticism and cautious curiosity. They exchanged glances, a silent conversation passing between them. One doctor, perhaps sensing the unusual certainty in my voice, or perhaps simply desperate, decided to investigate. A few tense moments later, the medication was retrieved, administered, and almost immediately the crisis began to subside. The alarms, which had briefly resumed their clamor, quieted. My breathing eased, my heart rate stabilized. It was a miracle, they called it, a spontaneous recovery. But for me, it was anything but spontaneous. It was a direct consequence of the knowledge I had brought back. Yet, when I tried to articulate the source of that knowledge, the profound journey I had just undertaken, their reactions varied. Some nodded politely, their eyes glazed over with a polite dismissal. Others offered explanations rooted in medical science, attributing my revelation to a drug-induced hallucination or a subconscious memory. My family, while relieved I was alive, seemed uncomfortable with the details, preferring to focus on my recovery rather than the unsettling implications of my experience. It became clear, very quickly, that this was not something easily shared or easily understood by those who had not walked through the same gate. The contrast between the boundless understanding I had just experienced and the limited, often fearful comprehension of the earthly realm was stark and deeply isolating. The indelible mark of that journey left me perceiving the world through a different lens, a profound awareness of the soul's eternal light. Yet this knowing often felt like a solitary burden in a world that didn't quite see. Returning to life, truly living again, was a transformation far more profound than the journey through the tunnel. It wasn't just a physical recovery, it was a complete reordering of my inner universe. The 16-year-old girl who had drifted into that gray void was gone, replaced by someone who carried the echoes of eternity within her. My priorities shifted dramatically, like tectonic plates rearranging the landscape of my existence. The trivial concerns of adolescence, fitting in, grades, fleeting crushes, faded into insignificance. What mattered now was the essence of connection, the purity of intention, and the profound sacredness of every living moment. Material possessions, once vaguely desirable, now felt like flimsy veils over a deeper reality. I found myself drawn to quiet contemplation, to nature, to anything that resonated with the profound harmony I had experienced. My relationships, too, were irrevocably altered. I no longer saw people merely as friends, family, or strangers. I saw them as eternal souls, each carrying their own unique light, each on their own journey. This perception, while beautiful, often created a chasm between myself and others. How do you explain to someone that their fleeting anger or their pursuit of superficial goals dims the very light of their soul when they don't even believe in a soul? This awareness, this knowing, became a quiet, constant hum beneath the surface of my daily life, making me feel perpetually other, a lone traveler carrying a secret map in a world that believed only in paved roads. My worldview, once a gentle, intuitive faith, solidified into an unshakable conviction. Death was no longer a feared unknown, but a homecoming, a return to a state of boundless love and unity. The concept of God wasn't an abstract theological idea, but a living, breathing reality, an omnipresent force of unconditional love that permeated everything. I understood with absolute certainty that my soul was eternal, pre-existing my human form, and destined to return to its source, to beings of love, light, and goodness. This wasn't a belief I adopted, it was a truth I remembered, etched into my very being. Every decision, every interaction, every thought I now knew mattered profoundly. Life was a sacred trust, a precious opportunity to live love, to embody integrity, and to keep the soul's light bright and unblemished. To harm another, I understood, was to harm oneself, to cast a shadow on that inner light. This profound understanding ignited a new, albeit often unspoken, mission within me. I felt a deep, almost aching desire to share this comforting knowledge, especially for a future I sensed would be marked by human suffering. It wasn't about converting anyone, but about offering hope, the certainty that our souls are eternal, that love awaits us, and that holding firm to the beautiful light within will ensure our return to God. I felt a quiet imperative to minister comforting words, to live as an example of integrity, and to remind others of the sacredness of life. My previous reticence, my private nature, now felt like a potential failing, a reluctance to share a truth that could alleviate so much fear and pain. Yet, integrating this cosmic truth into the mundane fabric of earthly life was and remains a monumental challenge. The world, with its noise, its conflicts, its relentless pursuit of the superficial, often felt jarringly dissonant. The loneliness of knowing, of perceiving a deeper reality that others couldn't or wouldn't see, was immense. When I tried to share snippets of my experience with spiritual friends, their reactions were often underwhelming, even dismissive. They sought dramatic visions, encounters with specific figures, or prophecies of grand import. My simple, profound experience of unity and knowledge, devoid of flashy details, was deemed boring, offering no info of value to them. This hurt deeply. It hurt to be misunderstood, to have the most transformative event of my life trivialized. And it hurt profoundly to witness the capacity for harm in others, the ignorance that leads to pain, knowing that nothing is more important than returning to God with a soul bright and shining, free of fear and hidden shadows. I can forgive, yes, but the pain of witnessing such disconnect, such self-inflicted harm, is a constant ache. My journey through death taught me that life is a sacred gift, each breath an opportunity to choose love over fear, compassion over indifference. It confirmed that God is love and that our souls are eternal, destined for a glorious homecoming. Though the path since has been fraught with challenges, with the burden of awareness and the loneliness of a unique perspective, I carry an unshakable peace. This experience, this glimpse beyond the veil, offers a profound hope that even in the darkest moments of human suffering, love awaits on the other side, and the light of our eternal soul can never truly be extinguished. May we all strive to keep that light bright for ourselves and for each other until we too return home.